Welcome to another episode of In the Lab with Hoopsology. A lot to talk about today. I am joined as always by my best friend and co-host, Justin Goodrum. Justin, how you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty well. How about yourself?
Doing well. Just trying to keep up with all the insanity from this first
Right.
round.
Mm-hmm.
Even a series, which we'll talk about, the Nuggets versus the T-Wolves, which I've watched the last two games of that. Pretty crazy finishes in both of those games down to the wire, even with a dominating win. It's been a good first round in terms of attention on the NBA. I think it's been a tumultuous first round. We will talk about that. We have some series that are wrapped up, some series that need a little finishing. They're incomplete. So we're going to try to predict things out for you guys where it makes sense, give some thoughts on that, as well as discuss what we think is going to happen, what our likely second round matchups are going to be. As part of predicting these things, we like to look at Vegas odds to help out with that because people in Vegas know their stuff. We will be using bovadasportsbook.com. And let's get into it, Justin. Without further ado, I think one of the most shocking things that has happened that we have seen that doesn't happen very often in NBA history is an 8 seed taking down potentially a 1 seed, and this is in the Eastern Conference with the Bucks versus the Miami Heat. Get our visual up here for those of you on video. You can see kind of the back and forth between these series. Kind of reminds me a little bit, not in terms of the gameplay necessarily, but the results when the Heat were playing the Spurs in the finals, how every game just about would be a blowout like this, like very few close games. That's what we've seen in this series so far. Obviously improbable. We had Giannis, just to give a quick summary, who, by the way, the Bucks, I mean, initially in the playoffs, Bovada favorites to get out of the Eastern Conference Finals, along with just about everyone, I think had them as their title finals as well. Giannis gets hurt falling from a controversial charge talk. Everyone's talking about changing the charge rules on defense and those kinds of things. But he gets a lower back contusion. He's still kind of coming back up to 100% from that. And Jimmy Buckets has increased his legendary profile, I would say. Justin, what have you seen so far from this series? And I want to know also, do you think legitimately, in spite of also Tyler Hero, I believe, breaking his wrist, do you see the Heat legitimately like finishing out this series, or do you think the Bucks are going to rally here?
Just looking at the Bucks experience, I do expect the Bucks rally, but I have to admit, I always underrate and dismiss the Heat every year, and this happens. And I think you have to really give credit to Jimmy Butler. And Vegas is not really showing the Heat any respect on Bovada. They're plus 1,400 as the Eastern Conference winner. And then also looking at the NBA champ, they're plus 6,500. So place your bets now for the Heat. I would if I was a betting man. But don't take my advice. Gamble responsibly. But I think it really comes down to the will of Jimmy Butler. I think he goes where the Heat go. And just what comes to mind is a video that one of our former guests did, Casey Kieran, on just Jimmy Butler's will to win, as his underratedness of the league. And he may come out as brash and maybe forthright, but he wants to win, and you can see the results consistently just on the teams he's been on. And the proof's in the pudding, as they say. So I do expect the Bucks rally. However, with the Heat in their driver's speed, their experience, and Eric Spoelstra's underrated as well. Don't forget about him. Very underrated coach. I've broken many hearts, including mine, with the Heat against the Bulls back in the day. He is a very experienced coach, and he knows what to do in a situation. Having a team of the caliber like the Bucks on the ropes. He knows how to get the job done along with Jimmy Butler, despite Tyler Hero being hurt. So the Bucks are definitely in trouble. I want to ask you just real quick, if the Bucks do go down, do you think Giannis will be held responsible for this? Do you think this will hurt kind of the mystique of the Milwaukee Bucks as they've had over the years, or do you think this will be an anomaly just because Giannis got hurt?
I think it's going to be similar to last year where we had Middleton out and the Celtics
Yeah.
get by the Bucks. I think totally when you have Giannis out for essentially like a game and a half, when he came back, he wasn't right away, and everyone could tell. I think that's going to be used as the excuse. And I think with the injuries, there are more that we'll talk about. It seems like just kind of a built-in excuse most of the time, So I don't think I wonder if Coach Bud, who has often been under scrutiny, if he will be kind of the scapegoat in that situation. But I don't even blame Coach Bud too harshly for this either. I think when you have a talent, imagine those early Cleveland Cavaliers teams if LeBron had been injured for 2 games essentially in a series. They would have had no chance. The Bucks certainly a lot deeper and more well-rounded than those Cavs teams, but they are built around the idea that Giannis is going to be there. And when you have such a force of nature like Giannis is, I don't know. I tend to give a little bit of slack as far as that goes.
Makes sense.
Jimmy Butler has been amazing. Can't take away from that for him. But I like the meme that's been going around about like Jimmy Butler on the Miami Heat, and it's got that like nice, I don't know, Ferrari or whatever it is. Justin, you're more a car person than me, I would say.
A little bit.
next to the shack, Jimmy Butler is your Ferrari there, and the Miami Heat are that shack at this point. In terms of their roster. So going to be fascinating to see what happens in that series. They are playing, we're recording this on the 26th. They play again tonight. So may be closed out, but it's going back to Milwaukee. Would not shock me at all if they come back. I do worry for the Heat if this goes 7, because you're given more and more time for Giannis to get healthy. And I do think they are a talented enough team that we could see that potential. So I'm not assuming a Heat win, but it seems to me like your best chance is to strike as quickly as you can. So if you can't get it done on the Bucks home court, then you got to get it done in that game 6 at home. Otherwise, I'm really doubting the Heat's ability to close it out. Does seem kind of improbable to come back 3 games in a row, though, for the Bucks. Let's move on. Next series I want to talk about with you is Bing Bong, the Knicks. The Knicks. Oh, my goodness. KD, don't you wish you were a Knick? You and I have been sharing with each other the videos of Knicks fans just freaking out in the streets. We've talked about this several times, so I won't go into it again, but long story short, we love it. I think one of the overall lessons of the first round in general, as I'm trying to sort of look at something to tie things together, one lesson I would say is that experience matters. And I think that is something that maybe has not been apparent or talked about enough. And I think that's what we're seeing here in this Knicks series. They're up 3-1. Madison Square Garden, like we said, is amazing during this series. So it's hard to imagine, even if they don't get this done right now, which, by the way, they're leading as we're talking here. Even if they don't get this done tonight, it does seem like it's over in Madison Square Garden. But a big part of this, I think, is that the Knicks have been with this core in the playoffs 2 years in a row now. And so even though they've had some failures and disappointments, they've been in there. Obviously, new piece Jalen Brunson has been a game changer as well. And Cleveland is a much younger team. So even though I believe you and I both picked Cleveland, I'd have to go back and check on that. But hey, credit to the Knicks. They're showing that experience matters. I do still stand by the Cavaliers being a more talented team than the Knicks. But I just think they need to go through their battles in the playoffs. Donovan Mitchell, really the only one with a whole lot of playoff experience there. So thoughts on this series, Justin?
Yeah. So I agree with you on the experience point. And when players say, well, every game's the same, especially in the playoffs, that's just a lie. I mean, the playoffs are has a lot more intensity when it comes down to it. And when you're facing an X factor, I think the Kings somewhat has this and Golden State a little bit. We'll get to that. But when you have a home court that is really intense and their fans are really aggressive towards the away team, that's a factor. And I think with Madison Square Garden, that is the mecca, and they're just hungry for a champion there. My question with the Knicks, if they do close out the Cavaliers, is Julius Randle. He
Yeah.
got benched in the previous game, and he didn't want to talk to the media. And you heard First Take, and I think more particular Inside the NBA slam up for that, and I agree. I mean, you're supposed to be a leader on this team. You're supposed to be a veteran. And look at Draymond. I mean, Draymond made tons of mistakes. He talked to the media, and he was like, and we'll get to it later, but he was like, bench me. I want to do whatever you want to do. I'll help the team. And I
Yeah.
just don't see that as an appropriate behavior moving forward for a Knicks team trying to turn things around. I think that's very previous Knicks era behavior. And I think Jalen Brunson is of a new era for the Knicks, and I just see that conflicting. So I think that's going to be very interesting moving forward. If the Knicks are able to close out the Cavaliers, what's going to be the stakes for Julius Randle moving forward if he can just handle the pressure? Because it's only going to get more intense from here. Even if they get to the Western, maybe get to the Eastern Conference Finals, I think Knicks fans will be very happy. But at the same time, if his play is underwhelming, he's going to take a lot of the blame. Will he be able to handle it? I would say no, based on what we've seen so far.
Yeah, and we did see some erratic behavior like that in the regular season at moments from Julius Randle, even towards the end of the season. One of the standout games in this series that gives me hope for the Knicks is they, in game 3, won 99-79, held the Cavaliers to 79 points. Pretty impressive. They are ranked on Bovada as the 5th favorites. No, I'm sorry. Heat are the 5th favorites. The Knicks are the 4th favorites at plus 900. So, hey, if you are in love with the Knicks, there you go. You've got a chance to win a lot of money if you know something that we don't know. I do wonder, I think if we get Knicks Heat, who would meet up if the series play out as we are assuming they're going to play out, that is going to be a messy, messy series. And we talked about experience. Jimmy Butler has the most experience out of everyone there, no doubt. I do
He's
wonder.
salivating.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I do wonder at the same time if the Knicks are better suited in terms of being a little bit younger than the Heat, a little bit, maybe have a little bit more stamina physically for another rough series. And I wonder if Jimmy Butler kind of like peaked to get through this Bucks series and if he'll be able to repeat that. We don't know. It's going to be fascinating to see what happens, obviously, but congrats to you Knicks fans. Happy to see you guys. Most likely, in my opinion, I'm predicting you to get to the second round. Let's go to the West Coast. We've been on the East Coast for a minute here. And let's talk about the number 1 seed Nuggets. They knocked off the Timberwolves in 5 games. And the Phoenix Suns, who are the Western Conference favorites on Bovada at plus 175 above everyone else. They knocked off the Clippers in 5 games. Big part of that series, Suns Clippers, was Kawhi Leonard missing the series. Paul George was out from the start, did not play in the playoffs this year. Kawhi Leonard, we heard it was a knee sprain. Turns out he tore a meniscus. Gosh, such a bummer because he had been playing so well. And then all of a sudden just poof, he's out of the playoffs, and so are the Clippers. I want to ask you about this, Justin, because I did see on social media on First Take, Stephen A got a lot of heat from JJ Redick, who both you and I like. I like Stephen A as well, if I'm being honest. Stephen A got a lot of heat for saying that Kawhi should retire from basketball. I think that's a little bit hyperbolic, but with the Clippers moving forward, I don't think it's unreasonable to put out the narrative that they need to be seeking out trades for Kawhi, with how unreliable he has been. Unfortunately, in some ways to no fault of his own, but there are different communication issues with him with his injury that people have been highlighting the last few days and over the years. What are your thoughts on the Clippers and what do they do moving forward?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. I don't think he needs to retire. That was
Yeah.
pretty shocking when he said that. I mean, pretty
Yeah.
disrespectful. And
Clickbaity.
typically, I don't. Yeah, I don't. Typically, that's a Skip Bayless take more than a Stephen A. take. So, I'm surprised he said that. To your question, I do think they should trade him. I don't know about the particulars of his contract. I don't know the details, but I think it's very clear that Kawhi Leonard is a number 2, number 3 player in this league, just based on his injury history, and he's just unreliable. And at this point, where the NBA is going, there is a point to him missing that many games. You just can't do it in this era of the NBA and being a number 1 player. Now, as number 2 player, number 3, that's different. I mean, how many games did Andre Iguodala play? And then, he's a factor in the playoffs. So, um, I think as a premier star in this league, I think he is not that anymore. I think we can all agree upon that. But I don't think he should retire, and I think he has a plenty of value when he is healthy. So I think for the Clippers, the question is how they're going to restructure that roster. Even Paul George is too. I mean, he has an extensive injury history as well. So I mean, you have 2 players that are hurt a lot of the times, and they're getting up there in age. So at this point, I think it's just a massive question as what do you do? Do you want to stay like at the 5th seed all the time and just get bounced in the first round, or do you want to retool and just rebuild this team? I mean, there's a lot of pressure with the Clippers with their new stadium. They're trying to really rebrand this team. I mean, there's a lot of questions that need to be answered.
Yeah, I think you have to pick one or the other right now
Yeah.
between Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, in my opinion. And I think Kawhi has been much less consistent. Again, when he's on the court, like you mentioned, I do think he's a premier star, but unfortunately, he's not always available. I think he could change any game significantly. He
Agreed.
could have been the best player in this series, and
Yeah.
KD and Devin Booker were on the floor too.
Yeah.
And he could have bested them both. They won that very first game of the series. And then the Suns, although it was closer than it seems from like a 4-1 series victory, the Suns just rolled from that point forward in terms of winning 4 consecutive games. So I feel for Coach Ty Lue because he's done such a good job this season. It's got to be so frustrating when you're hearing. I mean, he was hearing like morning of a playoff game that Kawhi Leonard wasn't going to be there and what the status was going to be for him. So that's enough for me. And plus, we have the track record. We've had a few years of Kawhi on the Clippers here. I love you, Kawhi. I respect your talent so much, but I think the Clippers, from a franchise perspective, should get some parts for him, even though you could argue you're not going to get an even deal for Kawhi. But if Kawhi's not playing, I think that's kind of arguable too, because even if you get role players, but they're playing, more than 80% of the games over the course of the season, that might be a net positive for you. So to that point that I made about it being close towards the end of the series, do you have concerns on the Suns side of things for how much energy they expended or seemed to expend getting through this series? Do you feel higher or lower on Phoenix? I mean, you can't deny it's like kind of a dominating series win in some respects, but also Kawhi wasn't there.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything to be concerned about from this series. I think it's more how they match up with the Nuggets.
Mm-hmm.
And also, what factor is Kevin Durant going to be in terms of integrating him in the offense? And that's what Devin Booker said, trying to get him acclimated. It's an adjustment. And I think we saw clearly when Durant was with Golden State, we saw Klay Thompson and Steph Curry take lesser of a role. And in this offense here, it's different with Booker and DeAndre Ayton and Chris Paul. How is that all going to gel and work? Can I figure it out on the fly against a pretty established fundamental Nuggets team? So to me, I favor the Nuggets in that series just due to their
Mm,
experience, their
against the
defense
Suns.
against the Suns. Yeah. However, I do think it's going seven, and this is a rivalry series. I mean, clearly, the games are fantastic. I think that's the second game I saw last year. I mean, that was a great game. And the Suns beat them on the Nuggets
Mm.
floor last year. So this is going to be a fantastic series. It wouldn't surprise me at all if Phoenix pulls off the upset, but just due kind of more to continuity and their kind of a little bit of inconsistency. And again, what I mentioned with Chris Paul, sometimes he's great, sometimes he gets hurt. We just don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to pick the Nuggets.
Well, you mentioned Phoenix pulling the upset. It would actually be the other way around, at least on Vegas odds. You're right in
Oh,
terms of
really?
seeding,
Yeah,
but in terms of Western Conference favorites, Phoenix number one at plus 175 on Bovada. Nuggets, disrespectfully, third place below the Lakers. The Lakers are second
that's
place in
crazy.
Western Conference
Crazy. Yeah,
final winner odds. Yeah. Nuggets at
yeah.
plus 350 in third
Pretty
place. The
disrespectful.
Lakers at plus 300. Title favorites, it gets even more disrespectful to the Nuggets, in my opinion. They are, let me do the math here, they are sixth, tied with the Lakers at plus 900 on Bovada again. So sixth place as title favorites, as the one seed in the Western Conference. So let me give a quick kind of counter. So you have Nuggets in 7 is what you said?
Let me see. Let me take a look at my bracket to be official. Yes, I picked them um, in my bracket, and I picked. You talk about disrespect. I picked the Nuggets in 6 over the Suns. So I guess I'll stick
Boom.
with my original pick. So Nuggets in 6. I'll take it back. I'll stick with my original prediction.
Right on. One thing that concerned me seeing the Nuggets and T-Wolves series is it does seem like Denver has a difficult time in crunch time. It's a little bit shaky. Granted, that happens to a lot of teams. I'm a little bit worried when they go up against a team with assassins like the Suns that I think KD as a closer, nobody would would argue with him. Booker as well has huge closer potential there and has shown elements of that. I mean, dating back to the bubble when the Suns went 8-0. So I am worried. I would love to pick the Nuggets, but I'm also concerned about their defense. And I'm wondering how much of a factor their depth is really going to be over the Suns. I do think there's huge burnout potential for the Suns. And you mentioned Chris Paul. I think that's a huge, very fair point that's concerning for Phoenix. At the moment, I'm going Phoenix in 6, and I hate picking that because I love the Nuggets. I will be rooting for the Nuggets, just full honesty. But right now, I don't know. I'm a little bit worried about the Nuggets' defense and
Makes
offense in
sense.
crunch time.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, and especially
But
when you
we'll
have two
see.
guys. Yeah, when you have two guys, Booker, Chris Paul, and Kevin Durant can hit clutch shots. I mean,
Yeah,
there you go.
yeah, and I wouldn't be leaning on Chris Paul as you kind of alluded to earlier, but when you have that experience in the moment too, like we've been talking about, that matters. Jokic has been incredible, against the Timberwolves. Their bigs didn't really give him problems. Ayton has been able to give him some problems in the past. But I don't know. This Nuggets team is really balanced and they're firing pretty well too. Again, I'm just worried about them in crunch time if the games are
Yeah,
close.
true.
So let's move on to the Eastern Conference. Let's move back there. Trae Young hit an improbable buzzer beater to end game 5 and give the Hawks a win. That series is now 3-2. Boston leading that series. Celtics being the 2 seed, Hawks being the 7 seed. Sixers swept the Nets. Not much else to say there. That was just a dominant performance by the Sixers and kind of disappointing from the Nets, but nobody was expecting them to beat the 76ers. Let's talk about this matchup. I will, just totally eat it and accept the humiliation if the Hawks end up beating the Celtics. I do want to go ahead and assume Celtics versus 76ers in the second round. Celtics being the 2 seed, 76ers being the 3 seed. Boston Celtics, your Bovada championship favorites at this point at plus 200. 76ers are 5th in terms of title favorites on Bovada at plus 800, just ahead of the Nuggets there. And so, of course, Celtics also favorites to win the Eastern Conference Finals. Interestingly enough, Milwaukee, the second favorite still to rally back, I guess, and move their way through the brackets, regain their footing there. Tell me about Boston, Philadelphia. What do you see in this matchup, and who do you like here?
Yeah, this is a great matchup. Just to be consistent on my bracket, so I don't miss anything. I picked the Celtics in 7. Interesting, I talked to my dad. He's a huge Celtics fan. He's originally from Boston. He's not a fan of Jason Tatum.
Oh, wow.
He just thinks he's somewhat inconsistent. That's interesting. I tend to disagree. I think in terms of consistency, I go with Tatum and Brown over James Harden personally. And we've seen Embiid, even with like we don't know his injury status either. I mean, that's another thing as well in terms of this series. So, I mean, if he's hurt, it's over. I mean, there's no way they could beat Boston without Joel Embiid. So I just think I wasn't even factoring that in, to be honest, in terms of my pick. I just thought Embiid was going to be healthy, but he's hurt. So especially if he's going to miss games in a series, Boston, I think, has this on lock. And I think they probably win in less games, but just to be consistent with my earlier picks, I'm picking Boston in 7. But if Embiid is missing any type of games, this will make it more less of a struggle for the Boston Celtics for now. But I think Embiid's health is the main factor, is the X factor here.
Totally. And we see pretty eye to eye on this. I like Boston a little bit more. I have them in 6.
Yeah.
And I think a big part of that is just their strength is a 76ers weakness in that their great players are on the wings. And I think in the modern NBA, it is tough. Embiid is dominant and probably is about to win the MVP. We don't know yet. But I think it's going to be tough for the 76ers to keep up with the pace of the Boston Celtics. And James Harden has had postseason troubles in the past. Just ask me. I'm a Rockets fan. And he's a little more broken down, a little more worn down now. And I just don't think – I think Embiid can dominate. I think Embiid can get 50 points a night if he wants to. But I just don't know that that's going to be enough to handle the balance of the Celtics and that 1-2 combo of Tatum and Brown. And I agree with Vegas here. I think Boston are the favorites in the East now, given what happened to Giannis, etc. So yeah, I'm very high on the Celtics as well. Any other thoughts on that series? All right, we'll go ahead and move on. And I wanted to talk about a series that is very much still competitive and in play. They are playing again tonight on the 26th, as of recording this podcast, the Kings versus the Warriors, a series that has been up and down, back and forth. Again, a lot of controversy here. Draymond stepping on Sabonis's chest in game 2, gets ejected with a flagrant 2 and then suspended for game 3. A lot of talk about that. Then, as you alluded to earlier, is willing to come off the bench. Draymond being gone game 3 did not matter. The Warriors took care of business. They took care of business again in game 3. So it's even 2-2. This is another thing we have is that De'Aaron Fox has broken his finger, I believe left index finger on his shooting hand. So that's another thing. He says he's going to play through the injury. it's a little bit rough when you have an injury to the shooting hand like that. They are in Sacramento tonight. They do have home court advantage. I think you and I both, or I know that I picked Golden State in 6. I believe you had the same pick. Are your feelings changed at all about this series? Do you think it's going 7? Do you have the Kings winning now? How do you see this playing out?
I picked Golden State in 7. So I still think it's going 7. And it's tough. I think I'm going to stick with Golden State. I don't like with the turnovers. That's an issue. But I do like with Steph Curry his leadership on here, and not only that, but like the Inside the NBA said defensively. And I think what's going to be interesting is what we pointed out earlier is experience. And I heard in the previous game, Mike Brown took I think De'Aaron Fox and somebody else. I don't remember. Maybe it was Malik Monk. I'm not sure, but anyways, he took them to a playoff game with the Golden State. And I forgot who they were playing, and just to get the vibe of what the intensity of a playoff game is, and they were shocked. They're like, "Wow, this is really intense." So now that they're actually playing Golden State now, and so that's the question: is if it goes 7, we know Steph Curry's been there many times. Klay Thompson, Draymond, it's just different, and especially even on the road they're just going to be very mentally tough, even if they're down 15, down 20. How are the Kings going to feel? How are they going to feel if if the shots are not falling, if they're down by 20, if they're down by 15 in the fourth quarter? Like, I realize the NBA is a game of runs, but psychologically, when there's a lot of pressure and everything's on the line, they're new to this. The Golden State Warriors are not. So I think that I give Golden State the edge, but this is a really, really close series. I love the intensity, and I think this will be a rite of passage series for the Sacramento Kings, win or lose.
Great points. Golden State, by the way, tied for 3rd place favorites on Bovada as your Western Conference finalist. And they are in 4th place, tied for 4th with the Philadelphia 76ers at plus 800 to be the NBA champs. And I think, as we said earlier, experience matters. And that's why I'm still sticking with the Golden State Warriors, alluding to some of the things you and I discussed when we were predicting this series before game 1 had even tipped off. I think it's going to play out that way still. It's going to be heartbreaking for Sacramento, but you have a good young core, and Keegan Murray will be a year older next year, and you can run this back and likely have a very successful season and hopefully a deeper playoff run as well. Yeah. Looking at our last first round series that is playing right now, and I want to pull this up so we can actually check in on the score here. Close game, so credit to Memphis for that. We're talking about the Memphis and Lakers series. You and I both had Memphis in 6 games, and it turns out, like I've been saying this whole show, experience matters, and that's what the Lakers have proven here, and also they have stayed healthy. So they have defied our expectations. And I believe Bovada had the Lakers as the favorites in this series, riding that momentum from the regular season. So, hey, sometimes you should not bet against Vegas like that. Lesson learned there. But the Lakers have been great, and I have to give huge props to Anthony Davis for his defense. He hasn't stepped up like scoring wise. It's kind of been by committee, through LeBron. Of course, LeBron had that incredible layup at the end of game 4. And it's incredible what he is doing in year 20, as everyone is saying, but it's true. So I don't mind echoing that. Davis has been just piling up blocks, and his rim protection has been outstanding this series. Justin, are you ready to change your pick here? Say the Lakers are going to take this the rest of the way. And how impressed are you by them?
Impressed with the Lakers, impressed with the roster changes with Rui Hachimura and with Reeves as well. I thought they've really changed their teams with those trades. And I think the question comes down to Anthony Davis's health. I think Bovada right now they have a lot of respect. They're plus 300 as the Western Conference winner. So I think that's pretty crazy in terms of how much respect they're being shown there. I think, to your question, I've not what I've liked seeing from Memphis at all. Just I know with John Morant, he's been suffering with the hand injury. They lost Steven Adams even before the series started. We've seen Dylan Brooks in terms of, I think mentally breaking. This is a big pressure situation against, arguably in a lot of people's eyes, the greatest player who ever lived with LeBron. So in a playoff situation, and I think we're seeing the pressure mount. And I think, again, as we talked about with John Morant, through his legal troubles and that being cited for why he did that, this will be a test if they indeed do lose to the Lakers, how he's going to handle that. And I think if he handles it correctly, this could be a benefit. This could motivate him in terms of, cleaning up what he has in his personal life and becoming a better leader on his team, or it can have the opposite way. So this could have, long lasting consequences, just depending on how Morant uses it if they do lose tonight.
Yeah. It turns out losing Steven Adams was a bigger deal than I certainly thought it was going to be. I love Steven Adams. He's one of my favorite players in the NBA right now, but it was a big deal, and it speaks to what you see Memphis going through. I think speaks to the point that T-Mac and a lot of people have been making, that this team needs some veteran leadership. They need to lock that down a little bit more. It hasn't been enough to just have Steven Adams as your veteran leader. You need more. And we're seeing, again, experience matters. We're seeing a very young team get, unfortunately they had a better run last year than this year. They've talked a lot of smack, certainly. And unfortunately, they're not willing to live up to it, as Dylan Brooks has been running away from the media at this point, not attending those press conferences. So I know it's disappointing to lose, but if you want to truly be the villain and be that heel, it's such a disappointing way to go out when you've been talking so much and then you just duck out of press conferences after you're losing in the series. I think you got to own up to that, just as a human being, as a man, as someone who wants to be a respected player in this league. I just find it very disappointing. You took on the heel role yourself. You took it on proudly. And I think you should just go for it. Stick with it. Even if you say something ridiculous in that press conference, just own it, dude. I don't know.
There'll be more respected if you do it. No, I feel
exactly.
I co-sign everything that you said. No, agreed.
Exactly. So disappointed to see Memphis flame out this way, but I guess I should have seen it coming a little bit more with just all the chaos around the John Morant situation, these injuries piling up, etc. I guess I was more just low on the Lakers. I don't feel like I was too high on Memphis. I didn't see them maybe making a deep playoff run, but there it is. It does seem like the Lakers, maybe not tonight, but the Lakers are having a great chance to close this series out, going back home for game 6. So those are our series. Wanted to give you a quick recap on some NBA awards, and then let's get out of here. A lot of Bovada favorites winning their respective awards, but we have quite a few that came up since we last updated on this. Rookie of the Year, no surprise, goes to favorite Paolo Banchero of the Orlando Magic. He is a beast. He's going to be an awesome NBA player. Looking forward to that Orlando team growing, hopefully at least making the play-in tournament next year. We'll see. Coach of the Year unanimously was Mike Brown. Got voted in. He was also a favorite on Bovada. Congrats to him. Feels good to see him get that win. Sixth man of the year goes to Malcolm Brogdon of the Boston Celtics, former Buck player, former Pacer. Locks down that award for his role on that team. And most improved player, who I think you and I would both co-sign on. Super happy for him. Former Bull, as you know, Justin, Lauri Markkanen. Yeah. And good to see, I don't know, the Jazz take home something for the effort that they put into this season, even though they didn't make the play-in tournament. Thoughts on any of those awards, Justin?
No, congrats to everybody, and keep safe for Laurie Marketing. He's in the military.
Yeah,
I think it's I forgot which
Finland,
country.
right?
Yeah, yep, and I think that's a requirement. So his head is shaved. It looks totally different when he was
Yeah.
accepting the award. So just stay safe and come back. So
Yep, absolutely. So, congrats to those award winners. One last piece of business. I just want to touch on this real quick, and then we do have to get out of here. But the Rockets have some worthwhile news, and I want to talk about it because, dang it, the only thing I get to talk about is their wins being in the teens lately or whatever. They made a big splash and hired Ime Udoka. I listened to a lot of different opinions on this. Seemed like he interviewed with the Raptors. Interestingly enough, Ramona Shelburne said on the Low Post, Zach Lowe's podcast, that there may have been just too much heat around that situation and how things ended in Boston for the Raptors to be interested in him,
from a
which I
PR
find,
perspective,
I think so.
okay.
And I think from respecting the women on their staff, et cetera. I know people
Hmm.
feel a lot differently
Interesting.
about this. It's still kind of murky, all the details about that. The Rockets allegedly did their own investigation and did not find issue with hiring him. So he's the Rockets' new head coach.
Wow.
I find it a little bit curious that he already accepted this position. Like, we don't know if the Rockets are getting Wemby or even a top 3 pick at this point. So it's interesting that he already signed in. It makes me wonder if his options were limited, this Rockets team being so young. As a Rockets fan, I'm stoked. I think he's going to bring the defensive intensity that they need. He already addressed the media and said that he told the guys that youth is not an excuse, which I think is the perfect attitude that they needed. That's refreshing for me to hear. So I'm pumped from an on the court perspective. But it does seem like he could have had the pick of other teams potentially. There's a lot of interest in his name given his success on the court. So I do wonder if there really just was a huge difficulty in finding a team, given that sort of PR nightmare in some respects, some would say. What are your thoughts on this hiring, Justin? You can be a little more objective than me in this
Yeah.
situation. I don't want to touch too much on the personal stuff. We've covered that in past interviews and things like that. If you want to take a look back at our interviews with Celtics experts and Kayla Gray of the Toronto Raptors coverage,
Yeah.
but what are your thoughts on this hire, just overall, from both from his
Yeah.
perspective and for the Rockets?
Solid hire for the Rockets. I will say we don't have to get fully into it. The fact that he hopped onto this opportunity tells me he was desperate. And because usually you
Hey
know how it
man,
goes in the NBA, there's a huh?
I
No
said, hey man,
disrespect.
no, no,
No,
just
well,
teasing. You're right. You're right.
yeah. To me, it's just there's other teams in the NBA that might make coaching changes. So why it's just to me, and especially with the Rockets, they have some upside, but we don't know the future. And I will say, we don't have to get fully into it. We don't know the details exactly. So for the Rockets, they are taking a risk. I mean, we who knows with journalists and what could become uncovered later on, what has really happened in Boston. So, I mean, I think for both sides there is risk on both areas there. But if it does pan out, I think from a basketball standpoint, this is huge for the Rockets and a huge upgrade. So, I understand why you are happy about this, even though there might be some risk.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I do think this Rocket team has a ton of talent. It's
Yeah,
all
they
just
do.
very young, and they're very unfocused on turnovers and defense. And I think those are two areas where he is going to be livid if they don't do those things. So either they are going to improve on that, or I say this jokingly, he's going to have a heart attack or something. If they play like they did this season, it's going to eat him apart. Given how intense he was on the Celtics sideline in a near title run in Boston, his only year as a head coach. So I think there's going to be massive improvement there. And I would not be shocked if the Rockets are in the play-in tournament next season. And it's kind of a win-win for him as a coach as well, if you think about it, because nobody's expecting much out of the Rockets. And, nobody's there's not a whole lot of pressure. And if he turns it around, I think even if they make the play-in tournament, he kind of looks like a genius again.
Oh yeah,
So
he's coach of the year if that happens. So
even if he wants to jump to another job eventually or whatever, or maybe the Rockets get Wemby, knock on wood, and it starts to look kind of interesting in Houston. So there's kind of the pros, I think, from his perspective. The Rockets are not going to be in, title contention or Western Conference contention next year. It's still very much a rebuilding team, a developmental project, but I think they'll take a big leap with Coach Udoka at the helm. So enough Rockets talk. I know we got 5 minutes there, so I appreciate that. Justin, pleasure doing the show as always. A lot of stories we didn't even get to touch on just yet because there's so much going on. But we will get to those. We have a lot of great interviews coming up. Did a great one earlier this week that you guys are really going to enjoy when we release that. And there's a lot of great stuff that we are looking forward to putting out there and having you guys listen to. If you made it this far, thank you so much for listening and supporting the show. Any last thoughts, Justin?
No, just continue to enjoy the playoffs. It's been a great round one. Hopefully the later rounds live up to the hype of as we're currently seeing right now. So
I think they will. Some great round two matchups as well. I'm pretty stoked, genuinely stoked. So for Justin Goodrum, I'm Matt Thomas. This has been another episode of In the Lab with Hoopsology. Take care and peace out.
See you next time.